Hey everyone, I'm Brian Beutler. I write and publish the Off Message newsletter. I'm here with David Seligman. I think I'm pronouncing your last name right.
That's right.
That's Seligman. Okay. I have the Beutler, Butler, Butler problem with people. So
Bueller. Yeah.
yeah, Bueller. And he's running in the Democratic primary to be Attorney General of Colorado. We're going to talk in this discussion about Jared Polis, Tina Peters, the job of Colorado Attorney General, and maybe for fun at the end, we'll chat about factional politics and the bitter, never-ending struggle between neoliberals and post-neoliberals. But before we get started,
On all voters' minds, of course. You know what I mean?
I'm guessing anyone tuning in right now who isn't from Colorado is kind of just learning about you for the first time. So can you offer them like the abbreviated history of yourself? And then
Yeah.
we'll dive in.
Yeah. My first time running for office. I'm a workers' rights, civil rights, consumer protection lawyer, executive director of a legal nonprofit called Towards Justice. So I've dedicated my career to, standing up in court for working families using the antitrust laws, the consumer protection laws, the workers' rights laws, fighting for, tens of thousands of Amazon delivery drivers who are forced to urinate in bottles to meet Jeff Bezos' quotas, for meat packers who's, have disfigured hands because of the biggest meat corporations in the history of the world's brutal line speeds. We're fighting for renters, taking on corporate landlords, people drowning in medical debt. Just one in the United States Supreme Court, a case I've been litigating for more than a decade, taking on the Geo Group, the private prison company that operates many of our immigration detention facilities, and have sued the Trump administration and won. And as I often highlight on the campaign trail, I've also sued the Polis administration here in Colorado and won. So I launched my campaign for Attorney General a year ago with the support of many of our progressive champions in the General Assembly, and I've been cranking ever since. Coming up on a primary at the end of June here.
So it sounds like you really want to, sort of put the Colorado economy on steroids by welcoming AI data centers
Wow.
and Trump prison camps like that. Am I misunderstanding?
Yeah, yeah. Look, I mean, yeah, and I think running for attorney general because we see how the wealthy and powerful play by a different set of rules, all the time, and I think that taking on that system is also critical to our economy, and that's how we can actually have a thriving marketplace that actually works for people. So,
Okay, so
um,
I'd heard of your campaign some time back from mutual friends of ours,
yeah,
but confession, I'm so focused day to day on federal stuff, which obviously does involve serving state AGs a lot of the time. They're suing the federal government, particularly given all the illegality in the Trump administration. So I've been kind of absent from covering state primaries. I realized the other day that I don't even have strong opinions about the California governor's race, and that's one of the most important uh, parts of the United States. So, but then Jared Polis started making noise last year about breaking Tina Peters out of jail, and
yeah,
she's this somewhat elderly insurrectionist woman who worked in Colorado elections. After the
yeah.
election, she committed multiple felonies in an effort to help Trump try to overturn his defeat. And when Polis started talking about granting her clemency, I wrote a piece saying Colorado Dems in the state legislature should threaten him with impeachment as kind of like a deterrent. Like,
Yeah.
not only do we not want you to do this, but if you do it, there will be consequences. And then they didn't quite do that, right? Like they did write him a letter saying you should back off in a sense, and he did for like 2 months.
Yeah.
But then he offered her the clemency anyhow. That was last week. Everyone got mad. But as near as I can tell, it was only you, and I think maybe a couple of candidates for state legislature who called then for him to be investigated, and maybe depending on, I guess, the outcome of the investigation, be impeached. So, A,
I
can you tell me if there's an update on that? Like, if there's been more of a groundswell, and then talk about why it's important, sort of apart from its impact on the attorney general primary race.
Yeah, I just want to a candidate for Congress here also called for impeachment. Malak Kuros, who's running for Congressional District 1 here in Denver. So Yeah. So first of all, I just want to like add one thing to the story here that's even like more fucking absurd is that in the meantime, the a court of appeals here in Colorado vacated her sentence and sent it back down to the district court for resentencing. So in the meantime, like our judicial system here in Colorado was already working through the sentence as a matter of state law, and as a consequence of that, frankly, I was shocked that the governor decided to move forward with clemency, which we've been hearing about for a long time that he was interested in doing, because he seemed to have this like obvious off ramp here, which was that the sentence was going to be reduced by the trial court under the in the normal course, like in the appeals process and in resentencing. But the governor was, for whatever reason, and I think this is why there needs to be an investigation here. For whatever reason, the governor was hell bent on letting her out of prison and using his clemency authority to do it. And he waited until immediately after the legislative session. I do think that the legislature should have threatened impeachment and put that on the table. I will say that all the Dems in the General Assembly did write to him, urging him not to commute her sentence. And so the Democratic Party had made it clear to him in Colorado where they stood on this issue, and yet he decided to proceed anyways. And I'll tell you, people are like, it's a sort of amazing. I mean, there is a groundswell of just an absurd amount of anger and frustration with the governor here from all over Colorado, including from Republicans who just thinks it's absurd that you let her off the hook, you let Tina Peters off the hook for corrupting our election systems and blatantly violating state law. And so what I've been calling for the General Assembly to reconvene in a special session for the purposes of investigating him and setting out a case for impeachment. And the case for impeachment, I want to be clear, is that the authority to grant clemency belongs exclusively to the governor. That's critical to our constitutional order, that the governor and not the president of the United States holds that authority. And yet it seems, based on all the reporting, like the governor effectively surrendered that authority to Donald Trump, which is incredibly dangerous and a breach of the public trust and a defiance of basic constitutional norms. Exactly the kind of thing that that impeachment is there to address. I've been calling on the General Assembly to reconvene in order to investigate him for those purposes, and we've received tons of support for that effort across the state. I'll say at the same time, the Democratic Party has formally censured him, and in the party sense, and so he's not going to be allowed to like go to the Dem Fest, for example, in June here in Colorado, and those types of things. But from my perspective, it's just not enough, right? We've got like the tools in our Constitution. We've got the tools of government to hold him accountable, and we have to use them.
Is it your sense that the Democratic Party is sort of censuring him, kicking him out as a member in some sense, but not as the governor, as kind of like a safety release valve, so that the legislature doesn't have to do it, like it's a half measure, or are these unrelated things? And you think that it's still possible that the legislature will come back and address this, at least to investigate?
I hope it's possible. I don't think that's the goal, is to let the legislature off the hook here. I think this is part of a groundswell of frustration inside the Democratic Party to use all the tools we have to hold them accountable. I've heard from the Speaker of the House, the President of the Senate, have said that we don't have the votes to reconvene in special session. You need 2/3 of both chambers to do it, which would require Republicans coming on board. I think Republicans should support this effort, at least for the purposes of investigation. But from my perspective, we just got to be done with the politics that says we're not going to try hard things. I don't think that we can allow the party's censure to be the end of the story here.
When would the Colorado legislature reassemble on its own, absent a special session?
Not until next year. So not until he's gone, right? And that's I've heard from others. Why don't we just like let him go, right? He's just like almost done. We've got a lame duck governor here. I think this is critical to sending a message across the country about the kind of crap that we just can't put up with inside the Democratic Party, and exactly the kind of approach to state governance that we can't allow to stand, especially going into the 2026 elections.
So I want to talk about what the investigation you've called for would look like in practice, like what it would be after. But I do want to get back to the sequencing thing that you alluded to, where the judicial process was underway. An appeals court had told the trial court judge, resentence this convicted felon, and Polis kind of swooped in and let her out before that could be completed, right? And as you say, that's strange because um, it's possible that she would have that her new sentence would have been quite short or something like that, and that there would have been no need for some special effort to get her out now. But I mean, I know from covering this from a distance that the trial court judge had a very low opinion of Tina Peters' character, right?
Yeah.
That she was remorseless, so there was no potential, mitigating factor where she was just like taken in. She was a dupe. She realized she was a dupe. Maybe then there'd be a better case for leniency. He thinks that she's, a corrupt individual. And so was the appeals court instruction to him specific about what her new sentence should be? Or
No,
was Polis anticipating that she was going to get a new, just slightly shorter sentence?
first of all, there's no suggestion that Polis was anticipating anything or really even thinking that hard about what was happening
Okay.
in state court. And also, there's there's this is not about Jared Polis is concerned about the length of her criminal sentence. I mean, this is the same guy, for example, who vetoed a bill last year that would have prohibited, municipal courts in Colorado for sentencing people for longer than state courts for crimes of poverty. We've got like almost a dozen people who are still there languishing in prison who have been through the rehabilitation program that he signed into law, where the parole board has recommended them for commutation. This is not a guy who typically cares about the harshness of criminal sentences. And the appellate court was perfectly clear. Like, this had to go back down to the trial court to resentence, not including to not considering her exercise of free speech rights related to the 2020 election. And the and there's just no reason that he needed to intervene now before that process had played its course. And it's not. And I just want to be clear here that what's most concerning for me, and this is not just like an abstraction or a technicality here. This is like fundamental to our constitutional order, and I think the tools that we're going to need to use to fight for our democracy here. The problem, again, wasn't just that she got out early. The problem was that Jared Polis intervened and seemingly doing the bidding of a president who wanted to trample state law, and allowing the process to proceed in state court under the framework of state law is consistent with Colorado's authority to administer our laws, to sentence people convicted of them. What Jared Polis did is just sidestepped all of it, and seemingly did the bidding of a corrupt president. So it's really about the interplay for me. The core concern here and the grounds for investigation and impeachment has to do with not that he let Tina Peters out early in itself, right? But more that he did the bidding of a corrupt president, seemingly, to make it happen.
So one more interceding quick question is that it sounds like you're saying, and this is actually kind of news to me, that Jared Polis's reputation as sort of like a libertarian on things like criminal justice are overstated. It's like a branding exercise, but not really core to who he is as a governor.
That's absolutely right. For him, very often being a libertarian means vetoing laws that would make it easier for workers to unionize, or that would protect
Lochner era type libertarian.
protect riders and drivers of Uber and Lyft from sexual assault, because the companies are screaming and yelling at him that they're going to leave Colorado if he signs them into law. That's for him what libertarianism very often means, not actually addressing some of the core structural problems in our criminal justice system. So. And
So
that's
let's
relevant here because I think that going to the question about like what the legislature needs to investigate, and what's important to the impeachment analysis is this is about his motivations, whether or not he committed malfeasance in violation of Colorado's constitution. Turns on why he commuted Tina Peters' sentence, and if he did it based on his own independent discretion and determination that her sentence was too long. Though I strongly disagree with that as a policy matter, that's one thing. But if he did it at the behest of the president, based on the president's pressure campaign, that's something different entirely.
So yeah, I wanted to ask you what you envisioned that investigation looking like, because I mean Trump has been very open in threatening Colorado. He was treating Jared Polis in Colorado the same way he treated the universities and the law firms, basically like do what I want or else I will punish you, right? And so the extortionate threat was just kind of hanging out there. And then Polis did the thing that Trump was demanding while claiming that there was sort of no connective tissue between the threat and the action. And so it's almost like an investigation. It sounds like that would be meant to sort of determine his mens rea in doing this, right? Like, was he doing it with the purposes of appeasing Trump, or for some other motivation, or for pure motivation, right? Like that he genuinely felt badly for this woman or something like that. And so how do you ascertain that? And then depending on what the investigation finds, how should it inform the legislature's judgment about what the consequences should be for him?
Yeah. Look, I mean, this is the kind of thing the law has to do all the time. Very often, the law has to deal with acts that are unlawful or wrong, only depending on what their motivation is. And in those kinds of contexts, you look at all the evidence you have of what was happening behind the scenes, what informed the decision. So, for example, in this case, we've now learned from the New York Times that Governor Polis's clemency advisory board recommended against clemency here. We'd want to see what that recommendation looked like, everything that went into that recommendation, what information he had from the people inside his office making a determination about clemency. We want to know what happened in these private phone conversations between the president and the governor of Colorado, which I find deeply concerning. And I think it's critical that we understand what happened there. And you'd look at the pattern of clemency that in other cases, right, how the governor typically goes about this analysis, whether in fact what he did in this case was consistent with the normal approach to these issues, or whether it seems like it was spurred by something entirely different, which is the president's pressure campaign and coercion. The question is fundamentally here. The question is whether he, from my perspective, the question for impeachment purposes, and this is different from whether he made the right decision or the wrong decision. The question for impeachment purposes is whether he surrendered the sovereign authority of Colorado to the president of the United States, who effectively forced Colorado to grant clemency for violations of state law. And that would be the core of the legislature's analysis.
In your assessment of Polis as a person and a public servant, do you think that the likely truth here is either that he was responding to the threat, or making an honest judgment about what was an appropriate action here, or is there a third road where there was like a carrot in addition to a stick being dangled by Donald Trump? Because Trump does that all the time, right? It's not just that he threatens people to get his way; he also bribes them, right? And I don't know Jared Polis's character well enough to know if you think that it's possible that there's more happening behind the scenes that an investigation could uncover about what made him decide to do this. Because,
Yeah, I mean,
and the reason I ask is because, if this was a year ago, March, April, May, whatever of 2025, I could see, a governor thinking it sucks to have to bend to this extortion, but I have to protect Colorado. I have to protect Coloradans. But it's been a year, and we've seen that the people who stand up to Trump fare better than the people who cave to him.
totally.
It just, I mean, I think he's smart enough to see that. And so it makes me think that there might be some other improper motive here too, but then I'm casting aspersions. And so I'm wondering what your sense of his character is.
Look, I mean, the governor is an enigmatic dude. I don't think he'd disagree with that characterization. Very often, gives off the vibe of a big tech bro running the state of Colorado. And so but I think a couple of things I don't want to tease out of what you just shared. First, I think you're absolutely right that we are now deep enough into this fight that he has seen how those who fight back, those who fight for their states, they do better, both in engaging with the Trump administration, and certainly they do better politically. But and that all the more reason why it's concerning and confusing that he chose a different path here. And if there are carrots, right? If this is part of if the coercion involved not just the threats but the carrots, that would of course be part of the analysis too, and would be part of what we would have to look at in determining whether, in fact, he was exercising his own discretion here or doing the bidding of the president.
So it sounds like you're saying, I think an implication what you're saying is that you sort of think that if an investigation concludes that, as strange as this move was, it was made with a pure heart, that maybe there's no remedy, or maybe the remedy is censure, something more symbolic, but that if there was a corrupt motive of any kind, the correct remedy is impeachment.
It has to be.
Is okay. So I want to press you on the first point, because there's like potentially a very big abuse of power story here, a corruption story, just a caving to, kind of depriving Coloradans of a Republican form of government by
Yep.
turning over power to the president, right? But I think that there's a civic impact, like even if his heart is pure or uncorrupted, which is that, like, totally apart from his motives, the substance of his actions communicates something to the public, right? Um, and and so the legislature could convene, they could investigate, they could find that there was no improper motive here, but there's still the fact that he has shown terrible judgment and made a decision that corrodes democracy. It creates a kind of moral hazard that tells other officials in Colorado that, hey, if you're thinking about illegally helping Donald Trump steal elections, things might not be so bad for you. Trump will come to bat for you, and maybe the governor will come to bat for you, and people in other states are going to get that message too. And it strikes me that, not that it doesn't matter what what an investigation would find, but that it shouldn't necessarily be the linchpin in determining whether he faces consequences. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah, great point. And I mean, there has to be consequences either way. There have been some consequences already in what the state party has done. There have to be consequences either way. I think the point that you're making is right. Like, even if this was based entirely on the governor's independent exercise of his own discretion, it is still stupid as hell. And I'll tell you, it's not just about communicating to people that they can come and steal our elections and get away with it if they, kiss up to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump decides to intervene in our in the the clemency power of Colorado. But it's like all kinds of ways in which corruption may be occurring here in Colorado. People getting ripped off, screwed over, whatever. The impression that they have is that Donald Trump can just override state law. That's incredibly dangerous to all of us. Whether or not the governor, acted on his own, it's immensely dangerous. But the question, as a constitutional matter, is whether the governor engaged in high crimes, misdemeanors, or other forms of malfeasance. And on that front, the governor's motivations are a critical part of the analysis. So there has to be accountability, like meaningful accountability, political and otherwise, and either way. But from my perspective, it's important that we focus here on, for impeachment purposes, on rooting the analysis in Colorado's constitution, and that's important too. In actually moving forward with real accountability. This isn't just about chest banging, and screaming and yelling for impeachment to get media attention or something like that. This is like a real violation of our constitutional order, and we should be taking it very seriously. So I think it's important that we draw the line between what may be impeachable here and what isn't, but recognize that either way, what the governor has done is terribly dangerous.
Yeah, because I mean, for me, the thing that, because I'm not from Colorado, like, so for the personal stakes for me are zero. Um, and I can see why some people would be tempted to just be like, look, the legislature's out. He's done soon. The Democratic Party threw him overboard. His career in Democratic politics is over. Like, why waste the capital or the time or whatever on this stuff? And from an outsider's perspective, the main thing is actually this narrative question about incentives and about, like, I have been reminded from this incident about the Democrat, the good guys win the Civil War, and then as a means of kind of massaging the country back together 150 years ago, they say we're going to let the bad guys kind of write the history of what happened here, right? And we're still living with the consequences of that terrible decision 150 years later. And even if Polis is operating from a pure heart, what he's saying is, you know what? If we're gonna heal the divide after the January 6th insurrection, it's gonna require those of us who care about democracy to extend an olive branch to the people who tried to overturn the election, and we need to, recombine in a stronger union, and that means we're gonna have to eat some shit, basically, and do things like pardon or grant clemency to individuals who are involved in that crime. And to me, that's like
Yeah.
those are the first steps in a decades long alternate history taking over the country to where children will not learn the truth about what happened and things like that. And I don't know if committing a crime against like civic integrity is impeachable in Colorado or in your mind, but to me it strikes me as actually the biggest thing, more than anything else, because he's so close to the end of his term already, right? Like the vindicating the question, Coloradans' right to a Republican form of government is important, but making sure that the rest of America doesn't have to live under this um, like uh, fake history where Trump won the 2020 election is more important still.
Yeah. I um look, I I agree with you, and I agree with the premise here about what the project is. I think that I think that we need to be faithful to the legal framework that guides the impeachment analysis. Impeachment isn't the only tool that we have in the toolbox for meaningful accountability here, and there's all kinds of other forms of political accountability, and I think we need to keep hammering this point. I agree with you completely. The governor is going about, if that's what in fact what the governor is doing, if he's trying to like heal the wounds, he's doing it in exactly the wrong kind of way, and creating a terribly dangerous precedent across the country. I think that that's one of the reasons why I think it's so important that the legislature even like fight to reconvene, even like go on record who in the General Assembly supports reconvening for the purposes of a special session. It is important that we make the efforts to use the tools, to wield the tools of government power to meaningfully hold him accountable. That's part of the message that we want to send across the country, whether or not the governor is actually impeached. And hopefully that gets at, in doing that, we are signaling not just our deep concern with the possibility that he defied the constitutional order, but also our deep concern with the consequences of what he has done, no matter what his motivations are, because those consequences communicate something really, I think, deeply dangerous to the rest of the country.
Okay, so let's talk about your AG race just more broadly. You described your legal work at the top, consumer protection, sort of helping Amazon workers who are abused on the job. Um, how would you bring that work to bear as Colorado's lawyer?
Yeah, look, I mean, I think we hear a lot about an affordability crisis in this country, and especially in Colorado. We see how people are just getting crushed, have a hard time putting food on the table, putting a roof over their heads. Very often, the affordability crisis is being fueled by what I like to call an accountability crisis. There are the forces of wealth and power trampling our rights and getting away with it. Polluting our planet, ripping us off, crushing our unions, crushing small businesses, and hijacking our politics to basically create a system of elite impunity, where the wealthy and powerful can trample our rights without consequence. And clearly, the federal government is not going to take on that fight. That has been abundantly clear, as the agencies that are there to protect working people, the Department of Justice, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, the Department of Labor, the EPA, are being completely dismantled by the wealthiest, most powerful people on the planet. State AGs are going to have to take the lead, and I'm running for Attorney General because I think Colorado can be the tip of the spear in Colorado and across the country, in fighting for a better world where people have prosperity, health, freedom, security. And in order to do it, I think it's going to require using the law in bold ways and courageous ways, and in ways we have not tried before, to take on this fight.
Like, what give me an example. I mean, obviously without, like, you know, describing a kind of lawsuit you already have in mind for if you win the election. But how so, right? Like, you know, it's what is going on in Colorado that could spread from Colorado elsewhere to create to try to sort of build like more equitable power share nationwide.
Yeah.
I know a lot of attention gets paid to the big states, right? Like New York has Wall Street and California has big tech, and so there's a lot of attention paid to how those states regulate and how they enforce their laws against these huge behemoths. Where does Colorado fit into that?
Yeah. Let me just give you one example. So we've got an oil refinery that's based here in Colorado called Suncor, that has been, polluting our air and water for decades and decades, engaging in thousands and thousands of violations of, the anti-pollution laws, Clean Air Act, and others. And Suncor made a $2 billion in profits, in the first quarter of 2026. The Polis administration fined Suncor $2 million for years and years and years of making like hundreds and hundreds of kids sick. So a $2 million fine off $2 billion in profits is literally the equivalent of like a $22 parking ticket. We just don't need to be living that way. The Attorney General here in Colorado has the authority right now to meaningfully make polluters pay, right? Orders of magnitude more than $2 million to make them pay for the harm that they're causing us. Now, those are the kind of fights that we need to take on. We've got almost 1 million Coloradans that are dealing with medical debt in one of the wealthiest states, in the wealthiest country in the history of the world. Very often that's medical debt that they don't even owe. We've got providers here who are not following our financial assistance laws in Colorado, not offering financial assistance to people who should qualify, billing people, sending them to collections without first, billing insurance, and we have to fight back against all of that, and we can use the law to do it, and use the law to really show up urgently in people's lives in the ways that they need it. There's another example that I always love to share is I don't know if you're familiar with the concept of forced arbitration. Is that something that's
Yeah, of course.
Yeah. So, like, just take a step back and think about this. Like, the vast majority of the contracts that you enter into with big banks and, your nursing home and your credit card company and your boss, they include these provisions in them, these terms written by corporate lawyers getting paid, hundreds of bucks an hour, that say that you can never hold the company accountable in court. You can never sue them in a class action. This has actually been core to the model of how corporate America has been ripping off people for years and years, because in many cases, if you've been a victim of wage theft, you've been a victim of fraud, you can't do anything to fight back in court, and you can't use a class action to do it. We've built our system around the existence of private enforcement. So in Colorado, and across the country, right, we do not have the resources in public enforcement, whether in state AG's offices or at the federal level, to take on the full scope of corporate abuse. We rely on private enforcement, the private right of action, people being able to stand up in court on their own to take on these kinds of challenges. But the fine print and blessed by Chief Justice Roberts and his buddies on the Supreme Court has allowed corporate America to steal from us the opportunity to actually hold them accountable through private enforcement. Something that no state AG has ever done, but that I would do. And this is just an illustration of what's possible in these offices is to stay on day one. You use a forced arbitration clause as a kind of get out of jail free card as a part of your business model for how you can engage in wage theft, for example, and avoid accountability. You become one of our top priorities for enforcement, right? We're looking at you first because we cannot rely on ordinary people being able to fight back on their own. Those are the kind of signals that we have to send to the marketplace to make sure that that people know that they can't screw us over and hide behind the fine print or hide behind political corruption, because those kinds of efforts are not going to work on the Attorney General of Colorado.
So the second example you gave strikes me as sort of like a civil equivalent of prosecutorial discretion or something like that. Like, it doesn't require the legislature to do anything. That the AG can just make those companies priorities. Basically, like, where there's smoke, there's fire. Also, like, people can't defend themselves against you, but we can, right? In the case of the oil company or the energy company that you described it for initially, is the issue that the laws on the books in Colorado aren't being enforced, or is the issue that new laws need to pass before somebody serving as AG can do something about it?
The core issue is that the laws just are not being enforced, right? We have the laws on the books across this country, right? We got the laws on the books to hold the powerful accountable, and frequently they are just dead letter. I mean, that's why I'm running for this job. You see it all the time, and I see it throughout. I've seen it throughout my career in standing up in court for people. Is that we've got the tools to hold the powerful accountable, to protect ordinary people, and frequently they are just sitting there, dead letter, not being used. I mean, going back to the Polis impeachment question, right, which I think is related to this broader project. We've got the authorities in government to actually hold the powerful accountable for abusing their power, and frequently they just sit there. They are words on a page, and we got to use them. And I think people are that's what people are hungry for right now.
So all these things that you're talking about, they slot into a big ideological fight playing out across the party. It sounds like possibly in your primary campaign for AG, but here in Washington at the federal level, we talk about like neoliberals and post-neoliberals, which are like the sharks and the jets of the Democratic Party. And I think it's basically fair to say that neoliberals are overrepresented in the existing establishment within the party. And they put a lot of emphasis on questions like program design and economic efficiency and optimization. And then post-neoliberals are sort of a more varied bunch, but they all seem to agree that whatever Democrats ought to do about taxes and spending and incentives and all of that, they first need to right size the whole power elite, right? So like Amazon, but also these energy companies and stuff like that. And so there's all kinds of ideas floating around in that space that range from like breaking up Amazon on all the platform monopolies, or imposing huge taxes on corporations and super rich so that they can't buy politics. Like right now, there's a fight happening about whether corporations should be able to build rental housing. So it's pitting the neoliberals and the post-neoliberals against each other. So it's this hodgepodge. But there's this mutual incomprehension because instead of this leading to a critique of the goal of reorienting U.S. political economy, or like collaborating on ways to disempower overpowerful actors, you have these fights over like whether these decisions are economically efficient. So like maybe the answer is we just need to tax the oil company more as opposed to send the state officials with police power into to like rifle around in their papers or whatever. And I wonder, where you come down in in this clash of visions, and how in tension you really think they are.
Um, you know, I think that these like Twitter wars are just like pointless and stupid. And actually, the longer that I've been on the trail, the more I realize how pointless they are. People want they want government to fight for them, and they just like want lives that are more fair, more free, more prosperous, right? And that involves, I think, yes, core to my vision about how we got to do that is we got to stand up to the elite, the powerful that have been trampling our rights. That's why I'm so passionate about this job. That's core to the Attorney General's work. Um, and it doesn't, of course, mean that we aren't, thoughtful about how we can, increase housing supply, which we should, of course, do. Well, at the same time, making sure that people are protected from getting screwed over. People want government to work for them, and I think that. That's something I just want to emphasize on this point. This goes back to are we done with the whole the other
Talk
version of
about
this,
whatever you want.
the abundance anti-monopoly fight that sort of like overlaps, I think, with what you're getting at here, which is that.
Yeah, I mean, the funny when I look when I study what these people want to do, I'm like, oh, if I were president, I think that's a good idea, and I think that's a good idea, and they
Totally.
gel together. And there's no reason for everyone to be at odds with each other. And in actually the piece that I published this morning, it's Friday, May 22nd, for anyone watching later, is that I think that mainly what's happening is that change is so hard to make in the United States, that the people that we're talking about who are fighting are always waiting for the 10 to 25 years it takes for Democrats to assemble a trifecta in Washington, and then they have to lightning strike, to do anything, before their power reaches a low ebb again, and they have to contend with the filibuster and then the courts, which are stuffed with Republicans. And so there's just almost no bandwidth to get anything done ever. And if you have strong feelings about what that should be, you have to fight your competitors, right, um, for influence over the people in power. And so I think that that's why the factional fight gets so heated, because the ideas don't actually strike me as super incompatible. There's just not enough bandwidth in the system as currently devised to allow lawmakers to consider good ideas and implement all of them, right? And so I kind of think that that's what's happening.
Yeah.
But
I don't. I agree with you completely, and it's absurd how we get forced into these to pick and choose between these sort of ideological buckets, especially in our politics, where the goal is to make people's lives better. Just one example of that. At one point on the trail, someone who was, I think, very online asked me some version of this question, and said, look, you talk about fighting the oligarchy all the time. Do you not care about making sure that the government can actually work better for people, and then we can create a more efficient government? And but that, of course, that's like core to what the project is here, and core to what I'm trying to fight about. So the example that I gave in response to that was a client of mine who told this story about how her corporate landlord had failed to fix the exterior locks on the apartment building's doors for months and months and months. And as a consequence of that, people kept coming into the building, and she had someone like die of an overdose, apparently in a hallway in another one of the buildings, which also didn't have working exterior door locks. Colorado law requires you to have working exterior door locks. Feces in the laundry room, and she said that every time she kept calling government, she'd call 911. She would call the Attorney General's office. She'd call the city of Denver. They'd tell her that they could come over, they could arrest somebody who came into the building, but that there was nothing they could do to force the corporate landlord, in accordance with Colorado law, to fix the exterior door locks. Right? There was nothing they could do about that on any sort of expedited timeline. And she's like, no, I just want someone to force the corporate landlord to fix the exterior door locks. That's the Attorney General's job. We can do that. We can make that happen. We can show up for people with urgency in that kind of way. That's government working for people. Government working for people to make sure that they can stand up to the wealthy and powerful forces that are screwing them over. But that's fundamentally what people want. She doesn't care, of course, if the AG thinks of himself as an anti-monopolist or an abundance person or whatever the hell whatever the hell those things mean. But we do absolutely need to make government work. Core to my vision for how that happens, of course, is taking on concentrations of wealth and power, because I think that has to be a core function of government.
I mean, I don't want to give short shrift to the idea that there are ideological tensions between the factions in the party. There definitely are, right? And like when we were first talking about this on the phone the other day, we talked about Amazon, right? And if you try to distill the fight between these factions online, you find people who are very invested in anti-monopoly law,
Yeah.
fighting with people who are economists talking about how that's a bad fit for a large platform like Amazon or e-tail or e-commerce or whatever. And I don't think that that's they're probably not going to agree about what the federal government should do about Amazon or other very large actors in the political economy. But I think that they probably do agree about the harms that stem from Amazon's power, right? Whether it's
Yep.
people work for them peeing in bottles that you mentioned, to the like independent businesses that have a hard time getting customers, to just like the fact that Amazon and every other giant service available to us means that we're spending so much time at home and not with other people out in the world, even if that's shopping, right? That you could make like life in communities better, more
Yeah.
cohesive, even if it means sacrificing like a 0.5% of GDP. And the question is, where are your values on that question? It's not about whether it's like, it doesn't matter what the mechanism is you use to either disempower Amazon or leave Amazon in place. It's, do you agree that a certain kind of idol, like a picture of the world, is correct, or that basically the government should just stand back and like let the private sector sort itself out. And if Amazon gets too abusive, eventually, a better actor will come along and disrupt it. And I think that is ultimately the fight in the party, and that it's profound. It's not nothing, but it it gets expressed in this terrible way because ultimately the people engaged in that fight realize that whoever becomes president next, like they're going to
Yeah.
hire people and they're going to have a small window for action, and it's either going to be Team A or Team B that gets what they want done, instead of having a system where the filibuster is removed and the courts are reformed, et cetera, so that a president can actually like listen to exponents on both sides of this argument and come up with a coherent approach to restoring some amount of economic and political power to regular people without necessarily invoking the Sherman Antitrust Act or whatever you know what I mean? Um,
No one cares about the tools. I mean, it's
right.
just like, look, who cares? From my perspective, yeah, we got to be using the Sherman Antitrust Act in all the ways we can, to make life better for people. But people don't care about that, right? Like, we got to be all the tools in the toolbox. And I think you're right that like very often we get roped into this fight about tools, and people don't give a crap about it. Like, I mean, I see this how this comes up on the campaign trail. How quickly, especially early on in campaigning, as a lawyer who'd never run for office before, trying to talk about how we're going to use the antitrust laws to take on worker misclassification. They're like, no one. That's not what people care about. Yeah, whatever the tools are, use all of them. Use them in different kinds of ways, because the point is, workers are getting screwed over. And I hear what you're saying, that like the fight is like posturing, and gearing up for a future administration. But I think that as a general matter, our politics and inside the Democratic Party, we have to do a much better job of not getting as hung up on the tools, and instead finding more clarity around goals. Because I do agree with you. I agree with you that I think a lot of folks would what we're all talking about here is like a more fair world. And workers shouldn't be peeing in bottles. Small businesses should have the opportunity to thrive.
Here's a neoliberal way to attack the problem that you're after: is every bottle full of piss that gets picked up in Colorado, Amazon has to pay $1 billion in cleanup fines. Problem solved.
Yeah, well, sure. Yeah, well, like, let's do it. Let's do it. You should, by the way, if you're interested, go. If you folks have not been, I urge you. It's a dark, dark view of our dystopian world, but if you go to a gas station near an Amazon warehouse, typically you'll see the outdoor trash cans overflowing with bottles full of urine, which is horrible. So
Yeah, I didn't know that. But it makes sense somehow. So I want to wrap this up, but I see a question here from Dennis, who I didn't have this on my list of things to ask, but it's important, which is I know when I think ahead to the future of like federal politics, is that if you don't do something about the courts, you're kind of screwed
yeah,
because you got to wait 40 years before you have a chance to fix them again. And so you could have all the great ideas in the world, but if the judges are bad, they're not gonna last. And so the question is, will Colorado judges side with law over common corporate practice? Is there an analogous problem in Colorado where the judges are bought into a certain ideology or partisan identity, and so they won't allow you to do the things that you want to do, or are the judges there more or less decent?
we've got lots of terrific judges here in Colorado, a terrific Colorado Supreme Court. I do think that as a general matter, we got to take on a system where the legal profession and our courts are tilted in favor of wealthy and powerful interests. And that's one of the reasons I'm running too, right? To be a outspoken, bold advocate for going after the core problems in our courts and in the legal profession, calling for structural reforms of the federal judiciary is just as just one example. We do have really good courts here in Colorado. Look, but that doesn't mean we're going to win all of these fights. I want to be clear about that. This has got to be core to my vision here too, this is core to my vision here too. Is like we're going to have to take a bunch of fights, and we're not going to win all of them. That's sort of inherent in taking bold and big ones, and helping to shift the law and set a precedent in Colorado and across the country.
I guess I should have been able to intuit that because the Colorado Supreme Court did the right thing in Trump v. Colorado
Yeah.
and tried to disqualify him from the ballot for being a oath-breaking insurrectionist. And then the U.S. Supreme Court is the one that sort of showed its true colors.
No, I mean, state courts are going to be absolutely critical to our fight to save this democracy, and we've got a terrific judiciary here in Colorado.
All right. Well, let's hope it stays that way. And we'll leave it there for now. David, I really appreciate you taking almost an hour of your time to talk to our readers today.
Appreciate you. Thanks so much, everybody.
Bye bye.
Bye.